Hey everyone, I'm David Warren and welcome back to this week's video. If you're new here, my channel is all about being a CRNA and being an emergency nurse practitioner. I want to share with you something new that I have developed in the past few weeks. You're going to get the first episode here, but before we dive into that, I want to tell you about a special promotion with Lecturio. Lecturio is offering 50% off on all of their nursing plans from May 5th to May 12th for their Nurses Week 2025 campaign. I'll link everything below. Check that out. I want to share a new podcast with you guys that I have developed within the past month called the Nomadic Clinician. I have already recorded season 1 and have uploaded it to virtually every podcast streaming platform. I'm going to link Apple Podcast and Spotify below. Go check that out. For the first season, I video recorded the episodes. This is season 1 and episode 1 that you're going to see today. My goal with this podcast is to have interesting, meaningful conversations with people who are in medicine and who preferably travel. I want to share with you behind the scenes of what it's like to work in Alaska. You've heard from me for several years now what it's like, but I want to interview other people and share with you their stories, not only as a nurse practitioner, but also in anesthesia. That's a preview of what is to come. I hope you enjoy season 1, episode 1 of the Nomadic Clinician Podcast. What's up, everyone? Welcome to season 1, episode 1 of the Nomadic Clinician Podcast. My name is David Warren, and I will be your host. Today, we are talking all about how I transitioned from nurse practitioner to CRNA. That is really dealing with the elephant in the room. And the other elephant in the room is, how did we end up on a podcast in 2025? I'll be quite honest with you, I never really saw myself podcasting, but the impetus for really this podcast in general was my commute back and forth to work. I find myself listening to content very frequently, whether it be podcast or audiobooks, and I thought, it would be really cool to start a podcast. And this is by far not my first rodeo with social media. I also run a YouTube channel called David Warren NP. That started about 6 or 7 years ago as a travel nurse practitioner. We'll hash all that out here in a little bit. And then I also run an Instagram page called David Warren NP and a TikTok channel called also David Warren NP. And so not my first rodeo with social media, but definitely my first rodeo with podcasting. And so we'll see how this goes. Episode 1, we're really dealing with the transition from nurse practitioner to CRNA. Like, how does that even happen? And I found myself really wanting to talk about this because when I made the decision thinking about, hey, I'm a nurse practitioner, I've been a nurse practitioner for all of about 8 years, and now I want to completely uproot my life and do something completely different in another field. I tried to look for information about that, right? Like I was trying to figure out, is it even possible for somebody like me who has worked in a field consistently for, like 8 years, is it possible for somebody like me to even go back to be a CRNA and to completely uproot my life and to do something completely different? And when I was looking for information on that, this was back in 2020, I didn't find anything, right? Like I was scouring the internet trying to figure out, are there other nurse practitioners who have become CRNAs? Is this like a thing that I can do? And I didn't find anything. It was very scarce. There were not many people, really anybody at all, talking about their journey from nurse practitioner to CRNA. And I also knew at the time, this is a moment that eventually I need to capitalize on because I possibly cannot be the only person out there who is a nurse practitioner, like very settled in my career, wanting to go back and do something different. And so I knew, like, if I were feeling that, if I were thinking that, there had to be like other people out there kind of in that same boat thinking about the same thing. And so that's really what I want to address today and to talk about today and just be very candid with you of kind of what that looked like. But before we dive into all of the details on that, I just want to share a little bit about my background and kind of how I ended up in that situation to begin with. And so the drive for becoming a nurse practitioner really altogether started in nursing school. And a little even before that, like I went to nursing school knowing, hey, I want to be an ER nurse. Like I was a child, I remember watching like the ER shows and just honestly like really being fascinated with the concept of like working in the ER. Like, as like a 5-year-old, like I'm glorifying this to the like highest degree possible. And unfortunately, that glorification continued. And those of you who are ER nurses or who have worked in the ER, there's not a lot of glory that goes into emergency nursing or emergency medicine really in general. And so, nonetheless, I pursued a career in nursing after high school. I attended the University of Texas, got my bachelor's degree in nursing, and again, went to nursing school knowing like I want to be an ER nurse. And in the middle of nursing school, I had the opportunity to shadow a CRNA and a nurse practitioner. It was really cool. Like my nursing program gave us that opportunity to shadow these advanced roles. I also like shadowed a physician. I got to shadow the like wound nurse, in the hospital. Like I got to shadow like these different areas and these different fields. And I remember shadowing a CRNA and really thinking that, hey, that's a really cool career. And I remember the day pretty vividly. It was at a hospital in Tyler, Texas, and I shadowed a CRNA. We were in an interventional radiology case, and it was a cerebral aneurysm coiling. And I remember like thinking that's so cool. Like they have such a cool job. Like I didn't get to see the induction. Unfortunately, I like came in kind of in the middle of the case. So the patient was already asleep and like, things were going smoothly. But I remember thinking like, that's really cool. And I think I would have been even more intrigued had I gotten to see the induction process. Like that would have been awesome as well. But I didn't get to see that. But even like my CRNA brain now, like looking back at that like experience that I had in nursing school, like looking back at that and thinking, I didn't really know like all that was going on at the time. Like now that I'm a CRNA and now that I have like done those cases, like I know kind of the background behind it and what's going on and the thinking and the thought process behind that. And, as a nursing student, I didn't grasp that fully. And so I think there's a part of being a CRNA that can look boring, right? Like you're doing a lot of the same task over and over again. Obviously, the thinking and the physiology, pharmacology, pathophysiology behind all these processes are completely different for each patient. But, as a nursing student looking on, I'm like, I could kind of see how that might be considered boring. But again, I didn't have the in-depth anesthesia knowledge then that I do now as a CRNA. And so I don't know that I really appreciated it. But nonetheless, like I remember the shadow experience and I remember thinking like, oh, that's really cool. Like I could totally see myself doing that one day. But I was like, I'm just going to finish nursing school, get a job, and like we'll worry about that later. And then I had a chance to shadow a nurse practitioner in nursing school as well. This was like in a family practice clinic, so not in emergency medicine. And honestly, like I really enjoyed that as well. Like I remember seeing the nurse practitioner and like going to see patients with her and being like, oh, that's a cool career as well. Like you can talk to patients, you can take their history, do an exam, order diagnostic testing, and then like interpret whatever you need to interpret, whether it be imaging or testing or labs or whatever, and then make a diagnosis and treat the patient or send the patient on their way or admit them to the hospital, whatever you need to do. And I remember thinking, wow, like that's a really cool career as well. Like I totally see myself doing that. Like I would definitely consider myself more of a like people person. And so that part of the career of being a nurse practitioner really spoke to me in the fact that like, hey, I get to like talk to these patients every day, have a conversation with them, get to know them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that side appealed to me as well. So in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, I could totally see myself like being a nurse practitioner as well and like going down that path. And so that's kind of what the shadow experiences looked like. And honestly, both careers were kind of triggered in my head. Like I could do both of these and be really happy. And so, but again, like, after I shadowed the CRNA, I was like, I'm still in nursing school. Let me just try to get through nursing school, pass my NCLEX, get a job, and then I'll worry about this later. It's not something I have to like make a decision on right now. But I kind of had those in the back of my head, like, yeah, like this is like I could do either of these careers. And I knew like going into nursing school, like I wanted to do something to further my education and not stay a bedside nurse my entire career. Not that there's anything wrong with being a bedside nurse your entire career. I just knew like that's something that I personally didn't want to do. And so I graduated nursing school, passed my NCLEX. And again, like, as I said earlier, I went to nursing school knowing, hey, I want to be an ER nurse. And so, come a time around graduation, like I'm looking for jobs, and I went to school in Tyler, Texas. And unfortunately, none of the hospitals in that area were hiring in the ER. And so I was like, this is such a bummer. Like, I literally came to this program, went to nursing school so I could be an ER nurse and work in the ER. Like, I did ER clinical, like we had options to choose our last clinical rotation in school. And I chose to go to the ER because I was like, I know this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be an ER nurse. And so I was kind of bummed. Honestly, this all ended up working out so well for me, but I was bummed at the time. Like, nowhere in the area that I wanted to stay was hiring. And so I was like, I'm going to look at other places. And so I was looking at Dallas Fort Worth, about 2 hours away from where I went to school. And lo and behold, there was a pediatric ER nurse residency program for like new grad nurses that opened up. And I was like, oh, I remember my clinical rotations in nursing school. Like, everybody literally hated pediatrics in the ER. Like, nobody knew how to take care of kids. And I like picked up on that very quickly. And so I was like, it would be really cool to go to the pediatric ER, do this like nurse residency, and be really good at pediatric, like sick peds. And that way, whenever I go and I'm an ER nurse in the adult ER and there's like kids that come in, like I'll be the resource. I'll know how to help take care of them. And so I ended up applying to this and getting accepted for this job. And so I started at Children's Health in Dallas as a new grad nurse and worked there for about 2 years. And really enjoyed it, like kind of got absorbed in the emergency, like really, again, glorified the whole like emergency process. And then while I was a nurse in the ER, part of this nurse residency, we had to shadow other professions. So I'd like shadowed a physician, shadowed a pharmacist in the ER, got to shadow another nurse practitioner. And again, that kind of really solidified at the time, okay, this is the career path that I want to take. Like, I know now, like I've been an ER nurse for like all of 6 months, and I've had a chance to shadow this nurse practitioner, like knowing this eventually, like not right now, but eventually this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be an emergency nurse practitioner. And I was like, I'll get my couple years experience and then go back to school to be an emergency nurse practitioner. And I didn't really give CRNA a second thought at the time because I didn't shadow them again. Like, I remember that experience thinking, oh, I could totally be a CRNA. But I also knew at the time, like most, if not all CRNA programs required ICU experience. And I was like, I'm really enjoying the ER. Like, I really have no desire to go transfer to the ICU right now just so I can go to CRNA school. So I was like, the career's kind of set. Like, I want to be an emergency nurse practitioner, and eventually that's kind of the path I want to take. And so I did that, worked for a couple years in the ER, and then applied to nurse practitioner school at the University of Alabama. It was a combined family and acute care program, and I wanted to like work in the ER, and this was kind of the clearest path forward at the time to be able to do that. And so I enrolled in nurse practitioner school and completed my nurse practitioner program. I did clinical rotations kind of all over the board. Like, I did family medicine, internal medicine, urgent care, some ER clinical, and then some like thoracic surgery clinical, inpatient endocrinology. Like, I did a bunch of like hodgepodge of clinical rotations just to kind of see like kind of what I wanted to do. But I knew, like, going into nurse practitioner school, like I knew I wanted to work in the ER. Like, that was the whole reason that I wanted to like go to nurse practitioner school. Like, I didn't want to work in a clinic, didn't want to work urgent care. Like, I knew I wanted to work in the ER. And so come the end of nurse practitioner school, I was looking, this was a master's program. I was looking for jobs in the ER. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I was in Dallas Fort Worth at the time, looking for jobs in the ER, and decided on a group called Quest Care, who's now merged with Envision. Envision, if you don't know Envision's like this big physician group that staffs like anesthesia, emergency medicine, like pretty much every specialty. And there's some good things and bad things about these big groups. But nonetheless, I found this group like covering a level 2 trauma center emergency nurse practitioner role. And it was going to be like a new grad nurse practitioner slash PA fellowship. And so if you hadn't worked in emergency medicine, or if you were a new grad, you had to go through this emergency medicine fellowship. And so I ended up getting the job and going through this APP fellowship. It was about 6 months long, and it was really like teaching new clinicians emergency medicine. It was taught by the attendings from like all over these different hospital sites in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We had skills lab, we had didactic, we had tests that we had to complete. Like that was pretty intense, honestly, but it was really good. Like it was good for new clinicians who hadn't worked in emergency medicine. And it was kind of like that new grad nurse residency program that I did at Children's Health that was for nurses, but this was for providers. And so it was really helpful to like have that more on the job training coming right out of school, like on specifically like these sites, how to do emergency medicine. And so you got to know your attendings really well. And like, obviously they were training you on emergency medicine. And it was just like really helpful. Like even now, like practicing as an emergency nurse practitioner, like I still look back at some of the training I got and still utilize some of that. That on the job training is really, like you just can't compare it. Like it's just really, really good. And so I would say if you are a nurse practitioner, look for these. You're like graduating soon, look for these fellowships. They call them advanced practice fellowships. And there's a lot of them around, in different places. They're super helpful on training you on whatever specialty like you're going into. And there are multiple specialties that offer these. Emergency medicine was one. Like I've seen them for hospital medicine, really any specialty. Like they offer these APP fellowships, and they're really, like, can't stress enough, like really helpful in making that transition from new grad to practice. And so kind of fast forward, like I worked that job for a couple of years, and then I delved into locums. We'll do a whole episode on this, on being a travel nurse practitioner, but I got into the travel world, ended up working in some of the coolest places ever. Like I did some stints in Iowa, did some stints in California. And then more often than not, I found myself in rural and remote Alaska doing wilderness medicine as a solo provider. Did that for about 4 years. Really, really loved it. Like it was definitely the highlight of my career, being a travel nurse practitioner. And again, we're going to do like a whole episode on that, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that. But I did that for about 4 years, the travel career. I would have, 2 to 3 PRN jobs in the area where I was living, so in Dallas-Fort Worth. And then I would do these 1 to 2 month locums assignments in different places, but again, mainly Alaska, doing wilderness medicine. Loved it. Highlight of my career for sure. And then come 2020, come COVID, I'm like slowly realizing over the prior 3 to 4 years, like, maybe the ER is not quite as glorified as I thought it would be. Like, it's cool, it's good, but can I really see myself doing this for like the rest of my life, for the rest of my career? And I think that's something that probably a lot of people go through. Like a lot of people really question, like, hey, is this something that I can do for the rest of my life? And I don't know that I gave that really good thought whenever I was considering going back to school to be an emergency nurse practitioner. Like, I don't know that I really thought, hey, is this something that I can like do the rest of my life? I don't know that I even like considered that. And that's probably a mistake on my end. Like I should have thought, is this like, I just naturally assumed like I'm going to do this the rest of my life. But like looking back, I shadowed an emergency nurse practitioner, but you can't really get like day to day, month to month, year to year experience doing that. Like you get this one time like window. It's almost like an EKG, right? Like you take this one little like 3-second window of what the heart's doing, and it doesn't give you a picture of like what's going on all the other 365 days a year. And so same thing with shadowing, like and that's for really any career. Like it doesn't give you a long-term look into that career. And so that was kind of a mistake that I had. Like I didn't really know like what I was getting myself into. And so 3 years later, I'm like, okay, is this something I can do the rest of my life? Or is this something I want to even do the rest of my life? And the answer to that at the time was no. Like, this is not something that I want to do the rest of my life. Like, do I want to do it on like some? Absolutely. But is this something that I want to do like for forever till I'm like 60 years old? And the answer was no. That's a hard pass. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work in the ER. And some reasons for that were like I found myself seeing anywhere from 10 to 20 patients a shift, like very busy depending on the emergency department. And the pay was decent, but not great. And we're going to do more videos on salary and kind of expectations for that. But, at the time I was like, I don't know if this is something I want to do the rest of my life. And I spent a few years thinking about that, honestly. Like, what else would I do? Like, I considered at the time maybe getting an MBA or maybe going down the business route or delving into some other career. And then I had this little thought, this little like bird humming in my ear. And I was like, I remember shadowing a CRNA like way back when in nursing school, like 8 years ago. And I remember thinking like, that was a cool career. And it was really interesting because where I worked in Dallas, Fort Worth, we had the opportunity in the ER as nurse practitioners that if we didn't meet our monthly like intubation requirements, that we got to go down to the OR and do like intubations. And so I interacted frequently with CRNAs, had a chance to shadow some CRNAs again after, I was an emergency nurse practitioner, and really fell in love with the career all over again. And I really thought kind of at the time, this was 5 years ago, now 5 years ago from now, I was thinking, I could totally do that. Like I think I want to pursue CRNA. Like, I think that's something that I want to do. And so going back to how we started this video, like I was looking for resources, is it even possible for somebody like myself who's been a nurse practitioner for years now and worked in a dedicated career? Like, is it possible for somebody like me to go back to CRNA school? And I didn't really find much information on that. And so I reached out to some program directors to really inquire, like, is it even possible for somebody like me to go back to CRNA school? And especially given my experience, I had good critical care experience in emergency medicine. I did not work in the ICU. And so that was kind of the rate limiting factor for myself in choosing a CRNA school, is the lack of ICU experience. I had really good critical care experience, but I had to convince others of that critical care experience. And so that kind of became the rate limiting factor in choosing a CRNA school. And so that's kind of the impetus for what prompted me to go from nurse practitioner to CRNA and kind of what that journey looked like. I ended up getting into National University out in California, and I attended CRNA school there. It was a DNAP program, and I graduated in December of 2024, so about 4 months ago now from the recording of this video and the recording of this audio, about 4 months ago. And at the time, before CRNA school, I had a master's degree. So I was in my MP program was a master's program. And I knew like I wanted to have a doctoral degree. Like that was kind of also a prompt. Like I knew at some point I either wanted to get a PhD or a DMP or something of that flavor. And I just wasn't sure kind of what that looked like. And again, when I was kind of feeling that burned out feeling, like, can I really be an NP the rest of my career? Like, do I see myself running around the ER, seeing like 20 patients a shift and like walking 6 miles a day? Like, do I really see myself doing that well until like my 50s and 60s? Or do I see myself doing a different career? And the answer to that, like, this is not like a decision that I made lightly. It's not a decision that I was like, oh, I'm just going to make this decision now and like start tomorrow. Like I really gave this some really good thought. Like I really thought, is this something that I want to do and something that I want to pursue? And the answer to that ultimately was yes. Like I do want to pursue anesthesia. And that was, again, after thinking like, is this even possible for somebody like me to go to CRNA school, reaching out to some program directors and inquiring the same, like, would I even be a competitive applicant? And then having a chance to shadow CRNAs again. And so that's kind of what the journey looked like, a very high 30,000 foot overview of what that journey looked like. And I would leave you with this. If you're kind of in that same situation, I used to get messages all the time from people really asking, is it like, can I go to CRNA school as a nurse practitioner? And I knew like at the time, like if I'm asking that question, there's got to be other people asking that question. And so other people have asked that of me. And here's the advice that I would leave you with. And that is really like think about and decide like, do you want to completely uproot your life and go down a different career path? And if you're okay with that, then my next question would be, what career path do you want to choose? If you're set on anesthesia, that's fine. It's possible you can do it. But also like consider other options. Like, would you consider doing academics, or would you consider doing something in business or engineering? Like you can totally switch career paths and do something completely different. But, if you're in nursing, I think the automatic assumption is you have to stay kind of in that lane. And like looking back now, like I know that's not true. Like I totally could have uprooted everything and did something completely different. And so that would kind of be one piece of advice I would leave you with is decide kind of what area you want to stay in. Do you want to be in healthcare, or do you want to uproot and do something completely different? If you're set on CRNA, that's totally fine. It's very doable. Just make sure that you're shadowing. And that's kind of the next biggest piece of advice I would give you is whatever career, no matter if it's CRNA or whatever you choose, make sure and shadow, because that's going to give you like real life insight into that particular career, what that looks like day to day, like month to month, year to year, that sort of thing. Like shadow, because that's going to give you the most accurate representation of what that career is going to look like and what it could look like for you. And so those are kind of the pieces of advice if you're considering like, hey, I'm a nurse practitioner, or maybe I'm a CRNA and I want to go back and be a nurse practitioner, whatever it is. Like if you're trying to switch a career, that's the kind of the advice that I would give you on coming from somebody who recently did this, who uprooted their life, did 3 years and finished CRNA school. Definitely consider that. That's definitely something you have to consider. So after finishing 3 years, 3 longest, hardest years of my entire life, I am officially a CRNA. I passed boards in January, started working in March. We're going to get way into the weeds in other episodes on kind of what my background as a travel nurse practitioner looks like, what I'm doing now as a CRNA, am I still working as an NP, kind of all those questions. We're going to dive deep into that in this season of the Nomadic Clinician. So that's really all I have for you on this first episode. Thank you so much for joining in. This again is just kind of a primer on who your host is, what we're going to be talking about, and what the journey from this point forward looks like. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.